Speaking with men and the women whose job it is to turn fledgling companies into international industry leaders. Welcome to Success Dallas. I'm your host, Dan Gibson. My guest today is Kevin France. Thank you so much for joining the show.
Thanks for having me, Dan.
Yeah. Kevin is the founder and managing partner of Momentum Consulting Group. And as a managing partner, your responsibilities, I'm assuming, are very wide-ranging, overseeing a lot. And tell me a little bit about your background and what you do there.
Yeah, so it's a good question. So I started off as like chief cook and bottle washer, because I was the only one, and that has evolved into a large team of folks. And so I would say if you could encapsulate it, is I am responsible for strategy. And so what am I going to do to move our company forward? And what does that look like from a market position, products and services, all the different areas and functional areas that we touch customers in.
So focusing on strategy, what does that look like? Because that again sounds like a big bucket. There's a lot of decisions that go into that.
Yeah, so every day, actually, Monday through Friday, my senior partner and I, we get together in my office and we spend 30 minutes and we say, what are the three things that's going to move momentum forward? So that doesn't mean that by Friday we have 30 different things that we can play off of, what we spoke about yesterday or 3 weeks from yesterday. And it's about, how are we going to grow our market presence? How are we going to enhance our customer service? Because one of our core values is excellence. And so, it's excellence, transparency, integrity, and fun. Those are our four core values. And so, all right, so, how do we deliver excellence all the time to our clients? And how do we ensure that what we are doing for our clients is relevant for the industry and the marketplace today? And so we're always reevaluating, we're always assessing to see, what we're doing is it impactful, and is it making a difference in the lives of the people that we interface with?
I think that may be a very underutilized core of fun. I'm still hanging on the fun one.
Yeah.
What does that look like? How do you run? Because I'm guessing that goes along with the employee engagement and attrition. And
it does. So, we have, every company has internal and external customers, right? And so obviously the external ones are the ones buying your stuff, but the internal ones are your employees and your staff. And so our core values align, on the excellence, transparency, integrity, and fun on the inside of our company with employees. So we have developed a very conscious culture, a culture that's highly intentional. And so we want to make sure that people are heard, their voices are heard, they're respected, they're uplifted, they're inspired. That's our jobs of our senior people, to make sure that everybody throughout the organization, we have a very strong corporate company alignment that we try to also work with companies on. But I think it's important that people have a voice and they have part of the process at Momentum. And so by having the fun, that's beyond team building, that's getting to know somebody personally, and just, and that's what's been a challenge actually over the last 2 years with COVID, is because, people have been remote. And companies are onboarding employees, and they have never met these employees. And so if you and I work for the same company, and I see you on a tele-video conference, and we might have been together 17 times on a tele-video conference, but there is not that off-camera rapport. So I don't know Dan, and because Dan and I haven't gone for a coffee together, or we haven't worked late at the office together, or we haven't had any jokes together, and so I don't have that relationship.
You haven't seen the profile picture of Darth Vader that I have in my office.
No, exactly.
Yeah, all the little character quirks that people have that make them endearing, and
exactly, and it's and that's been a big challenge. I mean, a couple years ago, I was interviewed by a London radio station, and they said, "What do you think the workplace is going to look like outside of whenever we emerge from COVID?" And I said, well, I think it's going to be a different place because there's going to be a lot of people that lack the interpersonal skills that have been brought into companies, and now they're just going to be thrust in front of new people. And so the whole dynamic of the workplace is going to change for a while. And so I think that's one of the, if you would say, the downfalls of COVID is that, those interpersonal skills have not had a chance to nourish and flourish. So
That's a great point. When I think of when we entered into the pandemic, I had a lot of, what I would consider work best friends or something. And not that those relationships went away, but they certainly didn't develop that further without a lot more hard work. One positive thing I noticed is meetings started on time.
yeah.
We've got a hard start on Teams or Zoom or whatever platform your company's using. It certainly is easier if everyone's at a desk, not having to move around to different conference rooms. But aside from that, that makes a lot of sense that a big problem coming out of COVID is going to be. I mean, are you thinking that the interpersonal relationships are underdeveloped, or also the people are underdeveloped at connecting interpersonally?
I think both. I mean, so if we take my example a little bit farther, if you and I, you just came on 7 months ago, and we've been on 17 different mediums together, or 2 different mediums together. I don't know your backstory, because your backstory has never come up, because it's always, all right, now here's this project we're working on, here's this engagement we're working on for a client, but I don't know Dan's backstory, and I can't have anything as a reference to relate to your backstory. Mm-hmm. And I could say, that happened to me when I was a kid, or when I was going to college, or when I was doing whatever. And then we start to form, some sort of a bond. That doesn't mean we're going to be best buddies. Maybe we will be, but it lacks that interpersonal relationship. And so that transcends into the workplace. And so if we're going to work as teams, right, and solve for our clients' problem, we have to know each other's strengths and weaknesses, and so we can gel those together to make a very cohesive approach and a solution for that client.
That makes a lot of sense. Well, let's go into the invention of momentum consulting and what role you hope that to fill in the years coming.
Yeah, that's a good question. So I started Momentum 11 and a half years ago. And I've always been in corporate America. And my first job out of college brought me to Texas, and from northern Indiana. And
welcome.
Yeah. And I thought, well, okay, I'm far enough south, I don't need a snow shovel or an ice scraper. Because I was a little mistaken, I guess. And so my first job was, it was not how I envisioned my life. So I envisioned my life, I would go, get out of college, I'd go into the Air Force, get into the JAG because I wanted to be a lawyer. But then I soon found out in college that I was not going to succeed at law. So I needed to get out of this whole law school thought mentality, mm-hmm. and because that just was not my forte. And so I got into business. And so my first job brought me to Texas, and through a beer company. And it's a very large international beer company. They had zero distribution in the Southwest. And so I thought, okay, well, obviously I'm out of college. I know how to drink beer. I know where beer is sold. So, this shouldn't be that difficult, right? Yeah. And so I was young and aggressive. And, next thing you know, I turned the southwestern part of the United States. I had 7 states into the number one category for the beer company that I was with, and then that started leading me on a path to another company called me, and they said, hey, we need you to manage our sales division down in this 4-state area, including Texas. And I thought, I've never managed anybody, and we need you to fix some processes. I thought, I have no idea what that means, but I'll figure it out, and I need you to sell. I'm thinking, well, I can do that. Mm-hmm. And so at this point, it's summing up as sales is real strong. Operations is something you're going to need to learn. Yeah, I'll figure the operations part out, right? And so And so I did, and so I was one of the regional managers in that company, but it was a privately owned organization, Canadian company, and very large, but very flat. And so I thought, there's no place for me to grow. And so I said, what if we created this national division that I ran, and we start selling to the big boxes? And at that time, Costco wasn't around, but certainly Walmart was, and Sam's, et cetera. And so I took that and took it from $0 to $300 million. And then and that literally led me on a course to people reaching out and saying, "Hey, Kevin, we want you to build a healthcare division." And I thought, I don't even know anything about healthcare. And but I says, okay. And so I said, tell me what you want, and they did. And so I went out, and I had some criteria, meaning that I needed autonomy, I needed to have resources, and I needed you to just help me, but stay out of my way, if you will. And so I did that, and I kept doing that. My price tag would go up, but whether then next thing you know, I went from a Fortune 50 division vice president to being CEOs of multiple companies that I built. And that then a good friend of mine in Dallas said to me, he says, Kevin, what are you doing? And I said, what do you mean? We met for lunch, and I said, what do you mean, what am I doing? And very wealthy man. At that time, he was worth $500 million. And I said, I'm CEO of this company that I built. And he says, but why? And I says, I don't understand the question. And he says, well, why are you doing it? And I said, because this is all I know. This is what I do.
Yeah, because it's fantastic.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of took him on the journey that I just took you on. And he said, why don't you start your own consulting company? Teach people how to do it, work less, make more money, all this. And I'm thinking, well, there's no work less, what I found out. And but it was very fulfilling. And so that's kind of how I got into the consult, because being a corporate, I never thought about being an entrepreneur. I never thought about being a business owner. And because, I just thought about, all right, this is what I know. And that's the challenge that we as humans have. We go to our comfort zone. And very few of us, have an innate ability to push beyond the comfort zone. So unless you're really pushing and trying to go over the edge, you're always going to stay away from the edge, right? Mm-hmm. And so which is very natural. And so and it was natural for me. And so that's how I got into the consulting business. And so over the next so we've grown. I started speaking all over the world on business and a lot of different other topics. And so that's how today we're in 38 countries on 6 continents. I had to start taking people with me, and because they'd hear me up on stage and they say, geez, how do we get momentum involved? And so, the next several years is, we're going to continue to grow and expand. I'm also involved. I own a number of other companies, and I'm also involved in a very large energy company that I have a significant interest in, a renewable energy company. So we'll be growing that as well. So, but momentum, we're still going to go out and make an impact on people's businesses. Whether that be a small business or extremely large enterprise, it doesn't really matter.
Well, the good news is it sounds like going from heavy sales, mixing operations, C-level executive, so also working in healthcare, that you're able to apply some kind of process. And I know earlier you said, originally I had a process, I'm not sure, but you've got some kind of process that is able to, when a company calls you and says, hey, we've got a problem, we need you to come in and solve it. What's kind of your go-to, without giving away the secret sauce, because no one really wants to completely, right? But what are some of the things that you do when a company initially contacts you and says, hey, I've got a problem?
So we go through a discovery process, and usually it boils down to 2 things, one of 2 things, or if not both. So they either have a revenue problem, so they have a sales problem, which can be a multitude of things. That can be everything from messaging, obviously marketing, to could be obviously supply chain. You hear a lot about that in the news lately, but it could be a genuine supply chain issue of them not sourcing their materials properly, or from a quality perspective, or it's an internal side of, so it's do they have the right company alignment? So earlier I spoke about company alignment, and I think that's really critical. And so everybody in the organization, whether you're the CEO or the lowest person on the totem pole, need to be aligned with the vision and the mission of the company. And I would tell you that probably 90% of the companies out there do not have that alignment. And where you have that alignment, you have wildly successful companies, and you have the instant 11-figure companies overnight, and or the 10-figure companies overnight. And so we'll go in, and so what people come in, they'll say, we need you to fix our sales organization because it's we're not getting the conversions, we're not getting we're just not hitting our targets. Okay, well, you probably have a sales problem, but you also have most probably a marketing problem, which then leads into IT, which then leads into how are you actually managing your clients, and what does that onboarding process look like, and so what they hire us for initially, oftentimes spider webs out into 30 different areas that we touch, because it's just not as myopic as people think it is. And so we have to dig deep and really look, and we talk to a lot of people inside the company to understand what their role is and what are they doing. And I can think of a company off the top of my head that wanted us to improve their sales organization, and so we did. We 3x their company size, and so it took them from literally 10.5 million or something to 33, 34 million. But I'll tell you, the sales was a derivative of what we already fixed. We fixed just about everything else. The training, the culture, and those are the two biggest areas that we really fixed, that we focused on, and because they had outstanding salespeople. But the morale in the company was just like horrible.
They were lacking the fun pillar.
Yeah, and then they were lacking the structure in the organization and the empowerment, and I learned a long time ago, if you keep your fists so close, so tight, nothing can come in and nothing can go out. And so we teach companies how to empower people and let them make decisions. And most people want to make decisions and to be held accountable. Surprisingly, studies have shown that over and over, but companies don't often let people do that, right? And so, I would say to a manager, I mean, we're both local, but if I said, hey, I'll meet you at the airport in a half hour, our unconscious consciousness would take us to the airport, you and I. Now, we might drive two different directions, and I'll say, okay, I'm going to meet you in Terminal A in 35 minutes, and I'll meet you here. You say, okay, well, if I get there 35, 37, 50 minutes, that's okay. If I get there 2 hours later, there's probably a problem. So my point is, you will have one way to do something. I will have one way to do something. Neither one is wrong, providing it doesn't take me 2 hours to get to the airport. And I already took some wrong, forgetting companies like Uber and Lyft, but if we're driving ourselves, then, we may find two different ways to get there, and that's okay. And that's a beautiful part about empowering people in a company, is because you have their creative thought and thought, well, geez, I wouldn't have done it that way. I wouldn't have gone that way. But that was a really good idea. And because of that, different ideas and things flourish. And so that's why I'm very big on empowering people and teaching empowerment in companies.
You mentioned earlier about autonomy, wanting autonomy whenever you go in to solve a problem. Is that something that you get much pushback on?
And sometimes. It depends on how control and compliant the company is, right? Yeah. And so if they are used to that if they are very highly controlled and compliant, and I'll have to sit them down, or one of our consultants will have to sit them down, the senior leadership, and say, hey, look, this is why in our opinion you're in the situation you're in. Follow us on this journey for 30 to 45 days. If you're right, I'll give you all your money back. But I'm confident that you're not. Now, we wouldn't say that necessarily in those words to the client, but it's companies and leadership like to control everything, and they can control the critical things, but give people the creativity to do their job, and I think they'll take them to amazing places. And it's all about hiring the right people. That's a challenge for businesses. It's one of the top. Actually, it's one of the top three challenges facing businesses today. The first one's getting revenue or creating good cash flow. And that's tough. And so having enough money to finance your organization. The second is really your marketing and message, and the third is employees and retention. So how do you treat your people? And are you doing it in a way that is uplifting, inspiring, and encouraging, or are you doing it in ways that are demoralizing? And people think, oh gosh, I dread to go to work today. And I think if they do it in the former way, then they get excited because they're empowered to make some decisions, and people like that. I mean, people like to be held accountable, and then reward them for what they're doing. And I don't think there's enough of that going on out there in the world too. And so we work with companies on how to design compensation plans that cost a company zero. You think, well, how can it cost a company zero? Well, because it's all incremental growth that you wouldn't have received anyways. So if you do it,
they're doing a better job.
Yeah.
Bringing in more revenue.
Exactly, or increasing your gross profit margins, or whatever it is, right? And I'm able to convert 5% higher, 6% higher. Geez, that's all incremental. So reward the people that There's an old. This will date me, but there's an old thing by Wilford Brimley.
Oh,
if you remember, dance with the people that brung you.
Yeah, was that from him?
He used to say it that's when Braniff Airlines was in business. That was, good grief, that was decades ago. But he would say, dance with the people that brung you. And I'm a firm believer, dance with the people that are getting you the results, and take care of those people. So,
well, let's shift now to the book, to the Momentum Effect, which has the titular name of the company in it as well. Would you tell me about when you wrote it? What inspired you to write the Momentum Effect?
Well, so I was traveling around the world, and people said, Kevin, we need to enhance the brand, and I said, why? And they said, well, I said, I really don't want to write a book about me, because I don't want this book to be chest pounding because it's just not that's just not my
this
style.
This book would
right?
be too awesome. I can't write it.
Yeah, no, I'd probably be the opposite. But thank you. Actually, the Momentum Effect was. I said, well, okay, but because I was in the process of writing the book that's now in final editing, and so there's a book that's in final editing. It's called Crash. 10 Steps to Building World Class: Why Companies Crash and Burn. So that's the book that I started with, and that got shelved. And they said, no, we got to build a brand. People have to understand who you are, and so forth. And so I went and wrote this book, and painful process, I thought at the start, and so I worked with an editor, and then we started really getting things into shape. And so I had everything lined up, and so then I wanted people that had high credibility on the forwards and so forth. And so I wanted the dean of the Harvard School of Business to write the forward. I thought, okay, well, I build businesses of massive size, and so it makes sense to have that kind of credibility. And so I reached out to him, and he said, all right, let me read the manuscript. And so he read the manuscript, and so he came back, and he says, I can't write it. I says, my heart just dropped. I thought, what? And I says, why? And he says, well, you talk about not burning bridges. And he says, which is true. And he says, but you just lit this one company on fire in this book. And I says, yeah. I said, but doctor, I says, I changed the industry. I changed the company name. I changed the products they sold. He says, but people will know. Yeah. And I thought, you're killing me. And he says, I said, well, will you give me another shot at it? And he says, yeah. And so it was a total redo, if you will, of the book. And then I went back to him, and he said, Okay, he said, I can't get to it for 3 months. I'm thinking, you're killing me. You're killing me. And I said, that's fine, because it was that important. And but there's key learnings behind every chapter, so it's not about me, but it's about things that everyday people can do. And because I'm not any different than anybody else. And it's just it's just that we have to be creative on how we go out and get business. And how we differentiate ourselves. I tell people all the time, our economic value is found in our differential. And so if we have great differential, our economic value should correlate with that. And so people will say, well, geez, it's really expensive to get engaged with you, Kevin, or it's really expensive to get your company plugged in. Well, what's it cost to have, 2 extra sales, 3 extra sales, enhance your brand, or whatever they're solving. So there's a cost to quality, and so I made it about the key learnings and not about me. And so and I climb mountains, and so the momentum effect, kind of made sense. And since I do climb mountains, and it's if you have enough inertia behind you, and if you have enough momentum behind you. And you are constantly monitoring and measuring, I think you'll have a wildly successful company.
Well, that's great. That's fantastic. That's good insight. I liked the analogy of climbing the mountain, because I had not thought of it that way. That it's a matter of having inertia behind you, which of course you need to climb up a mountain.
Yeah,
you're not going to get there just hanging on. You got to keep moving. Right?
Exactly. It was so back in 2015. I climbed Mount Kilimanjaro, and the last day before we summited, and we took the hard route. There's 2 routes to climb Kilimanjaro, and we took the harder route. And
just to prove it.
Well, I mean, Dean, our guide, who I've since become really good friends with. He asked everybody, he says, we knew ahead of time, he says, that it was going to be the harder route. But it was like 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. We had just finished dinner and a lot of carbs and all this stuff. And so we had a 7.5-hour climb to the summit. And, so keep in mind we went through 6 or 7 ecosystems, from the rainforest to the glaciers. And but he did his little pep talk, and it relates to business so spot on. He said, every step you take, he says, success, success, success. He says, and watch the step of the person in front of you. Did that step go well for him? Did the rock stumble? Mm-hmm. Did they fall? He says, because you may have to alter course. And he says, you're not going to get to the top of Kilimanjaro, he says, until 7.5 hours. And that's if you don't stumble and you hurt yourself. And he says, this is not a sprint. He says, just watch where you do, watch where you walk. And he says, watch the person in front of you. How did that go for them? And so I thought it was a really good analogy that every bit of our journey, whether it's in our personal life or business, is, every step we take, whether we fail or not, it's success. I mean, I've failed more times than I've succeeded. And but I have a relentless attitude of never giving up. And I think that relentless attitude transcends into, why I do what I do and how much I've done of it.
Yeah, and the masterminds, which is something else I wanted to get to, that having that background does make you a well sought out figure for someone to mentor for a couple of days, and dive in deep on details as quickly as we can, I guess. But what for those who don't know, what would you describe a mastermind as? Yeah,
so we'll bring 20 to 30 people into a room. We used to do these all over the world, literally, Singapore to Australia to Dubai and every point in between. And so we'd bring 25, 30 people into a room 2 or 3 days, depending on the setup of the mastermind. And we would put them in a hot seat, and literally there would be 2 seats in front of the room. I'd have 2 or 3 people that are business people such as myself with varying backgrounds. So somebody that maybe have a stronger marketing background than I would, somebody that may have a stronger background on financials or whatever it might be, and versus leadership. And we'd say, all right, tell us what your biggest problem is. And so they would have 10 or 15 minutes to talk about what their business is, where they're from, what's your biggest problem that you want solved. And they'd walk away, and we're going to start to do these actually in Dallas coming up early this summer, I think probably June. But and they'd walk away with a 90-day plan that says, okay, here's a 30, 60, 90-day plan of, so you're going to walk away from this mastermind with not only a strategy, but a vision and tactics to execute it. And then there would be a lot of other programs that we could put off to that as individual mentoring and things of that nature. But they were a lot of fun. They were draining. They were long days.
Yeah, because it's very intensive, right? It's
not
like
is.
It's not like a conference where you get to kind of passively interact. You're there to figure some stuff out and move yourself forward and your company forward.
We are, and and it's highly interactive. So I would be, so if so we would break out into groups, and and multiple groups would have different subject matters. We'd regroup and then talk about what we learned. And then, it would be highly interactive. Dan, how about this? What did you learn here? How are you going to apply this? And so forth. And we would do that with everybody in the mastermind. And so you could not be quiet as a church mouse and be in that mastermind. I mean, you could not be, a little cricket on the floor, and nobody, as long as you're not rubbing your legs together, nobody hears you, and sees you. So, you were actively engaged. And so I miss the masterminds because we got to meet a whole host of variety of people, and we brought a lot of value to their lives, and they brought a lot of value to our lives. And, I would often tell people that, geez, you think we're delivering value to you. I says, look at the value and ideas I'm getting from you.
Mm-hmm. And if you're creative at all, it sounds like a buffet.
Oh yeah, exactly. And for example, one of our we are highly customer centric. So at Momentum, and so we know over time a tremendous amount about our clients. We know their favorite color. We know if they're married. We know what if they drink red wine or white wine. We know where that wine comes from. We know if you're into horses. We know if you're into NASCAR. It doesn't really matter. But so we learn more about you. And so what happens is that guess what? If it's your anniversary and we know that you drink red wine, and we will send you a bottle of red wine and a nice card and so forth. Well, what we learned, and I learned this at a mastermind, somebody said, well, don't you have a lot of men that are CEOs that forget their anniversaries? And I said, yeah. And
good idea. I already know.
And so what we started doing was they says, instead of doing it on the day, we send it 4 or 5 days ahead of time. We say, hey, we know you were early for your anniversary,
Great
but
idea.
we wanted to get this to you just to have it whenever you were ready. So now we've dropped the bug in their ear that, don't forget, buddy, your anniversary's in 4 days. And okay,
Number one, we've got your back.
We got your back.
And number two, the wife is happy.
Exactly.
You're happy.
Yeah. And, it wasn't so bad when we were dealing with the women that are CEOs. And we deal with a lot of them, and because women are just more in tune to that than I think a lot of men are. Mm-hmm. So we learn things from different people. And so that's the great thing about masterminds is that, it's a mutual sharing of information.
Well, I'm looking forward to those coming back because you had kind of filled me in a little bit about it. It sounds like a lot of fun, but that a lot of, again, like I said, if you're creative or a problem solver, that's a buffet too.
Yeah.
If you're someone like you, a problem solver, well, you get to go solve a whole bunch of problems. Anyone creative, you get to be involved in fixing other people's problems as well as being there as a recipient of that. So that sounds fantastic.
Yeah, they're a lot of fun, and we get businesses from all sizes, from startups to pre-startups to we've had Fortune 500 people in the room. So and they bring their management teams. I mean, it's a great experience.
Well, that sounds fantastic. How can someone who's wanting to follow you, Kevin, or Momentum? How could they follow you, the company, and then also find out about the masterminds?
Yeah, a good idea. Well, we haven't We haven't published anything on the masterminds on the web yet, but that will be forthcoming. But people can find me on LinkedIn. It's just Kevin E. France on LinkedIn, Momentum Consulting Group on LinkedIn. If anybody wants to reach out to me personally, they can just email me at info@momentumconsultinggrp.com, and they can that will get routed to me, and just put my name in the subject line, just say, hey, make sure Kevin sees this or something. And but yeah, no, it's been a pleasure, to be here, and it's building businesses is fun, and it's very rewarding and very fulfilling. And I would tell people that are listening to this that you may be at a difficult place, at a different crossroads in your business, and that's okay. We've all been there, but it's what's your tenacity? What's your relentlessness that will keep driving you forward? It's that every step you take is success, and just be diligent, and I'm telling you, you'll get where you're after. But I see it so many times, Dan, that 90+% of people give up, and they're right at the edge of great success.
Oh man!
So
don't do that. Keep pushing everybody. Well, we love having these insightful conversations, helping you, the listener, discover how to turn your sinking ship into an aircraft carrier. And by listening to voices that do that every day. In this case, thank you very much, Kevin France, for joining.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Well, and everyone else, have a great day.